Hello and welcome to the App or Not To App Facebook Live. Tuesday, the day after Christmas. Hope you all had a wonderful holiday. Most of you probably aren't working, but the App Man, I'm working, baby. And coming at you live, as I always do on Tuesday, a little earlier than normal, because I figured you're, excuse me, I figured you're all on holiday. So I'd come at you a little early. Maybe you're sitting at your desk bored because you're actually at work. Whatever. Little different today. Today I'm going to talk about how much money, dinero, does it cost to build a mobile app. If you have an idea for a mobile app, put it in the comments. We'll talk about it. If not, we're just going to talk today about how much money it costs to build an app. The number one question I get in this world is how much does it cost to build an app? And hey, Tahid, what's up, dude? How do I cash out my Prosper account? Tried to do that today. Doesn't seem possible. Hope you're doing well, man. Anyhow, so, number one question I get is how much does it cost to build an app? And it's all over the board. There's a lot of different options. So I'm going to break it down kind of how, if you gave me an idea, then I could give you an idea of how much it costs. So one of the first things to think about is basically anywhere in the game, you're talking like 5,000 to 50,000. That's for a basic app, basic. And then anything that's not basic is going to be 50K plus. All right, standard. And I'll break down kind of what this is, right? So we'll get into it a little bit at the end, but depending on who does it and where it's done from, so meaning if you got it done offshore in India, you could get it done a lot cheaper. If you got it done in Eastern Europe, a little bit more. And if you want to do it here in the US of A, well, it's going to be a lot more, right? Because you're just talking about salaries. And basically everything comes down to time for money. So whenever I do an app project and bid out an app project, it's always the same. How many hours is it going to take? Times the hourly rate. So it's going to take 1,000 hours and it's $250 an hour. You can do the math there. We could do it, and then maybe you say, hey, that's too much. Fine. Hire somebody offshore in India for 12 bucks an hour, right? So you get the trade-off. You kind of get what you paid for. All right, so when I talk about estimating an app, so the first thing that we always talk about is kind of the design, the wireframes, and the UX. So somebody comes to me with a general question, hey, I want to build an app, it does this, this, and that, and then usually I come back, or I just do this live on the spot, right? Something like this. It's just a rough sketch of what I'll do, right? So like intro, free tour, reg 1, reg 2, payment, and just come up with all the screens. And they're kind of like, okay, cool, yeah, we need a screen here, we need that. And so now I know the number of screens, right? So one of the things, the three big ones, the three big things when I can tell you how much an app costs to build is the number one is the number of screens. How many screens, if there's going to be 30 different screens to do 30 different things, that's one of the things I'm going to factor in. The second one, number two, number of API. Number of API service calls. So if you don't know what that is, basically it means if you're on an app and you're registering for something, as you're registering, where does that information goes? It's going and getting stored in a database, or it's storing somewhere, or something is happening to that data. If you're trying to get like a Twitter feed or something like that, API call. Service calls. If you're trying to have a live video chat between me and you in the app, another service call. So again, number of screens, number of service calls, and then the third one is the number of tests. Number of test cases. How many test cases do we have? So if we have just a user, a regular user, let's say like Uber, perfect. Uber has a test case for a rider. A rider needs to be able to hail a ride. Uber has a test case for a driver. The driver needs to be able to pick somebody up. We need a test case if somebody signs up and the credit card fails. We need a test case if I don't know, there could be a number of them, right? We need a test case if a business wants to sign up and have their people be a writer. So there's all these different test cases that we're going to talk about. So when we have the three, number of screens, number of API calls, and number of test cases, and give you a good estimate, right? So let's get a little deeper into all of that. All right, so one of the first things we're always going to start with is the design, the UX, and the wireframes. Design, UX, and wireframes. UX means user experience. It's how people click through your app, what they see when they're signing up, what they see when they're using your app. So usually we start with wireframes. That's what I showed you earlier. This could be on a piece of paper. It could be PowerPoint. It could be, I use a mock-up service. It's called Ionic Creator, and it actually creates little click-throughs. So I can actually create an app that you could open on your phone and click through. It doesn't really do anything. It's just a kind of a click-through thing, but it gives the person a visual of what it does. So that could be a wireframe and a UX, and then design, right? And so usually in that case, for all of that stuff, we're looking at least 100 hours. At least 100 hours to do that work, okay? And then, so the next thing we need to consider from this point on is authentication. Authentication, login, and register. So, important step, log in and register. Pretty much every app has that. So usually, just if it's a basic thing, you're probably talking 40 hours plus, right? Like, so 40 and 100, those are the low ends of things. Okay, so that's where you kind of need to get to. Where's that piece of paper? Excuse me. Dropped it. Okay, so the next thing we need to consider, do people need to pay for something? If people need to pay for something, we're adding a little complexity, right? So any kind of payment or in-app purchases, any kind, 60 plus. 60's kind of the entry point. Tahid, reading your question, man. How should you budget the cost to integrate with a third-party app, API? Okay, so basically, that's perfect timing. It's almost like you set me up. Basically, any integration, like it's Google Maps, Twitter, any of them, start them at 40. 40 and up. API. Right? Any kind of integration is probably 40 and up. It's not counting QA. You know, so QA could be a little bit more on that. That's why we started them at 40. And a lot of them are pretty easy to do because they come with like good instructions. So I'll give you a good example. There's a company, it's called Auth0, A-U-T-H, and then 0. And what they do is they do login, passwords, and registration. So they are, it's just a plugin, and then when you open the app, it says register or log in, right? And on the register one, it says you can register with Facebook, with your Instagram, with your Twitter account, or you could actually put in data, right? And then once you've actually done that, the next time you come, when you log in, you could say like, oh, log in with Facebook. But say you don't remember if you signed up with Facebook or Twitter or whatever, and you type in your email, it'll recognize your email and be like, oh, they were a Facebook user, but they'll log you in. So there's some authentication services like this. This one is Auth0. There's Okta. There's a bunch of other ones that are actually out there. And when you use them, they're pretty easy out of the box to put in. Like, you install the API code, their code, and then you start testing away. The problem ends up being is that you always have to like customize it for the client. So the client might say, Oh, we want their phone number too, and that's not like a standard feature, so you have to add that on. So out of the box, most APIs are pretty easy to deal with and get started on. It just becomes a matter of how much you want to add on to them. All right. Authentication, social. So I would say this with the logo, with the authentication, the login, and the registration, that would include like a Facebook login, like what I just talked about. So 40 hours plus is what you're starting at right there. Okay. Now, so API integrations, and I'll put a note there. That would be like, it could be like maps, right? Location services. Those are pretty much your standard ones. There's some other ones that people like to do. Working on one right now. It's a prototype. If you have a sunglass store or an eyeglasses store, get in contact with me. I'm working on a prototype right now where we recognize your face, just like Snapchat does, and then we put the glasses on your face. You can turn to this side, and you can turn to this side and see how the glasses look on your face. Just a prototype I'm messing with, and we'll see if the client actually wants to buy it. But if they don't, I'm going to go down to the next person down the line and say, like, hey, you got an eyeglass store, eyeglass brand. You guys interested in this? But it's an API. It's called Tracking.js. Tracking.js stands for JavaScript, and it's just a facial recognize. It'll recognize where your eyes are, where your mouth is. So it's pretty easy to integrate. The hard part is actually putting the glasses and the turning part. That's the tough part. That's what I do. Okay, back end services. Next one. Let's see if I have enough room here. Back end services. Back end services meaning you're doing something within the app or website for this matter, and you're entering your name, you're entering information, you're entering where you want your Uber to take you. They are storing that data on the back end. They're actually storing that. So any kind of integration with the back end service, what do we put down here? Yes, 180 hours plus. So because what ends up happening is every time we send data to the back end and the people in your business see this data, they want something else. Then they see that, they want something else. So we always know there's going to be a lot of work in this area that we need to do. All right. So what do we got here? 1, oh geez, I'm not good at math. 2, 3, 4, 480, 490, 500, 520, right? With all that, right now, we got 520 hours, right? 520 hours. So that's pretty basic as far as what we're talking about, design. And then if we wanted to add QA, right, we got to test it. We got to make sure everything works. So I say, Tahid, you still on? How many hours for QA? Right? So like if this 520 hours, whatever that breaks down to, geez, I'm not good at math. Let's say, I don't know, let's say that of that 520, that breaks down to 12 weeks, right? Let's say we can do this in 12 weeks. In that 12 weeks, I need QA for 10 weeks. 10, we'll say one QA person times 40, it's going to be 400. It's a lot of time, right? So now we're at 520 hours to develop. We're at 400 hours to test. We're at 920 hours. We're at 920 hours. And that's pretty bare bones, right? We're just talking high level stuff here. So we'll say 920. I'm just going to say 920 total for now. We'll keep it real simple. So now you can do the math. $100 an hour, $92,000, $25 an hour. Can't do that math. You do that math. But you get the idea of what I'm saying here. Now, the X factor. Do you want Android and iOS? Do you want both? So let's talk about a subject near and dear to my heart, and that is hybrid versus probably will end up doing a show just on this alone. Hybrid versus native. Native means iOS and Android. That means we're going to program it twice. We're going to program it once for iOS, for an iPhone, and once for an Android phone. So we're going to have two sets of developers, maybe two people to QA for each, and two separate code bases. Now, hybrid, on the other hand, one. So we only have to have, this is done with web technologies, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, if you've heard of any of those. JavaScript, HTML, CSS. CSS is styling. It's one of the most, it's all what web pages are made with, right? So what happened is when the phones first came out, everybody programmed like this, iOS and Android. And ultimately, if you have, and in the early days, hybrid wasn't as good. There was scrolling issues. There was a lot of stuff. Again, I'll do a whole show on this. Maybe next week I'll do the show on this. And what happened is, so if you have like a game, like say you have a game like Clash of Clans or Angry Birds, something like that, with a lot of graphics and a lot of things going on over and over again and a lot of action and interaction, then you probably need native, right? You need like a lot of interaction with the actual GPU, graphics processor unit. That's what's running on your phone, basically. It's like a CPU, but it's for your phone. And so they've gotten better over the years, so you can do a lot more. But when they first came out, there was a big difference between the way something would react, the speed. And so if you wanted a game, you always had to go native. And still to this day, if you're creating a game, and if your mobile app is a game, then you got to do native, which means you got to do one for iOS and one for Android. And so this 920 hours, it's times two. Now, how do you choose if you need a hybrid or a native app? Simple. Is your app just a website? Here's your app, just a website. Like, look at Yelp, website. Look at Delta.com, website. Look at Universal Orlando, website, right? So there's websites. They don't have anything that's really fancy on them. Like a barcode scanner, folks, is not fancy. We can do it with native, or excuse me, hybrid, right? So there's a decision you have to make. So how much does it cost to build an app is the show today. So kind of broke it down. We got to this 920 hours on just kind of a standard basic build out. And now, once we get to that total hours, all we have to say is, do we want a hybrid or do we want a native? And then if we're going to go native, we know we got to times everything by 2. Our cost just went up a lot, significantly. Our time went up. It takes longer to test. And then in every native project I've been on, there's always one team is in front of the other. There's a couple of little things that always go on. One team's in front of the other. Like right now I got a team and the Android team is like way in front of the iOS team. So one team's always in front of the other. And then the other one that you always get, which is the most frustrating one from the development side, is something works here in iOS and doesn't work over here. So you get a bug over here. And then the QA team comes and goes, well, it works fine in iOS. Why don't you just do whatever they did over here? Well, it's different code. right? So these guys could have coded it completely different than these guys, right? So it's just the way it is. So, and then the final thing, again, if you're joining late, the hours for time, right? So we know that 920 hours, and then who's going to do it for us? Well, a couple considerations there. Make sure whoever does this total work can do all the work. And when I say all the work, I mean they can do the development, they can do the QA, they can do the back end work, they can do the database work. So they basically can do everything. So then all you have to do is manage. You only have to manage one group. If you do, if you hire one developer to do something and then they aren't good at back end and you have to hire another developer to do the back end, now you're kind of managing a lot of different people and a lot of different things. This does not include marketing, right? I would say that at this point, right? So 920 for dev and QA, right? We need some support after launch. Support after launch, I mean, you're probably going to need, I would say, 80 hours plus, right? Because after launch, everybody thinks like, oh, dude, we launched, it's over. That's all we have to do now. Trust me, when you're 2 months out of launch, you're going to start having to scrap things. You're going to say, we're not going to be able to make the launch if we include all these things. So we're going to take out 3 or 4 items. So there's support after launch, and then there's new development. There's new development after launch. And what do we call that? We'll call it phase 2. Phase 2 work. So that's an X. We don't even know what that's going to be, right? We'll have to scope that out after the fact. So there's that. And then, of course, you develop an app, you put it in the App Store. Congratulations. What about marketing? That's its own show right there. How much to market it. And what I always say is whatever you spent to develop the app, that's what you need to spend on marketing. So as you can see, it's quite an investment of time, quite an investment of money, and it is what it is. You need to get over that. Like if you have an idea and you think you can make money with that idea, then it's just it's X's and O's, baby. It's X's and O's. You say, okay, I figure it's going to cost me $50K to develop an app, and I think I can make $200K. Got to do it, right? You got to do it. And it's not just about if that app can make you money. What if that app could save you an employee, 2 employees? What if you invested $150,000 in your business for an app and it could get rid of 2 employees? Or it could reduce costs by $200,000. Or it could generate leads, right? So everybody's always thinking about like when they start an app, having the next greatest idea and, users are going to pay $15 a month for it or whatever. Well, step back a little and think about how an app can help your business. If an app can help your business and lower costs, you got to do it. Assuming it's going to lower the cost more than the thing. All right. That's the show today. Hope you enjoyed it. How much it costs to build an app. Hope you got some value out of it. Share it, like it, jeremycallahan.com. If you have any questions about mobile apps, I am here to help you, to assist you, and take your business to the next level. Have a great night. Little dance on that. Good night, everybody.